Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today I'm here to tell you about my journey so far into Monster Hunter Stories 2: Wings of Ruin. This title was sent to me by Capcom so I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. However, this video is not a traditional full-on review because I haven't really finished the game yet. Being a father of two during summertime makes it really hard to just sit down and play some video games. I'm currently sitting at around 35 hours of gameplay, and a lot of that time wasn't even spent working on the critical path because quite simply I've been having too much fun with the game. The gameplay loop of getting new monsters, optimizing their genes badly because I'm still a noob with this system, crafting new weapons and armor, and farming bottle caps that I'm sure I'll need at some point for something important, but then I spend most of them on haircuts that I'll never use because they look terrible. But before I get completely carried away, let's talk about what Monster Hunter Stories 2 is all about. Unlike the mainline series, Monster Hunter Stories is a JRPG. Your character isn't a hunter, but a rider. The main difference being, instead of hunting monsters, your main objective is to steal monster eggs, hatch them, and befriend them to fight alongside you. The obvious comparison that most people will draw is, of course, to the Pokemon franchise, which on a basic level is a reasonable one. After all, in Stories 2, you do befriend monsters that fight alongside you in turn-based combat. However, Monster Hunter Stories 2 does an excellent job at differentiating itself right off the gate, with a much more immersive story, better character customization and progression, better visuals, art style, animation, soundtrack, cinematics, and in my biased opinion, gameplay. But moving right along, suffice to say that in this game, you'll be befriending some of your favorite monsters in the Monster Hunter franchise and fight alongside them to prevent a great calamity that is taking place in the world of Monster Hunter. While combat is turn-based, your knowledge from the main series will give you an advantage as you will be able to more accurately determine a monster's strengths and weaknesses. In most cases anyways, because I gotta be honest, a Barroth using speed attacks wasn't something I was expecting. But even if you aren't familiar with the Monster Hunter franchise, you'll be fine since the combat is very intuitive. It just might take you a little longer to predict monster strengths and weaknesses on your first encounters. But as per usual with these videos, let's start things off with visuals and animation. Now, one of the first things I'd like to point out is that this art style isn't going to be for everyone. Some gamers simply don't like the whole cel shading with vibrant colors vibe that Monster Hunter Stories 2 is going for. But personally, I love it. In fact, a long time ago, I thought the next mainline Monster Hunter game to hit the Nintendo Switch was going to feature this art style simply because I really liked it when I first saw it on the Monster Hunter Stories game that came out on the 3DS. So personally, I love the art style, and I think it does a great job of portraying the monsters as well as armor and weapons. I thought it was the natural evolution for the Monster Hunter visuals before the release of Monster Hunter World, which obviously took a much more realistic approach. I appreciate both, but I find the story's art style really special. And before people accuse Capcom of ripping off Breath of the Wild, I just like to remind everyone that the first Monster Hunter Stories did it long before Zelda. Art style aside, I've been playing on the Nintendo Switch, and resolution-wise, I think the game looks great in both handheld and docked modes, in large part because the art style just looks gorgeous in general, like I've been saying. However, there's a decent amount of pop-in whenever there's foliage on screen, so if that's a deal breaker for you, you're better off going with the PC version. In terms of performance, it's not great. The version I'm currently playing, which is most likely the same version you'll play on release day, has the same variable frame rate we experienced in the demo. The game has an uncapped frame rate, which means if you're in a small space like a monster den, you can reach close to 60 FPS. On the other hand, if you're outside in one of the more open areas with foliage and monsters on the screen, it can go down to like 15 or so. These are obviously estimates as I don't have the same tools as Digital Foundry. However, Eric's has a nice side-by-side comparison of the PC and Switch versions, which I will try to link in the upper right-hand side. Let me know if I forget about it in the comments, because I probably will, because I'm old and my memory sucks. But no, just let me know. Now, while the performance isn't stellar, it hasn't really impacted my experience that much. This is a turn-based game after all. You don't really need twitch reflexes, and there's obviously the upside of portability. And that is the decision you're going to need to make. Do you want the Switch's portability or the PC's silky smooth 60 FPS and potential mod support? Personally, I'll take the portability, but to each their own. Do remember, however, this game does feature multiplayer, so consider your circle of friends when choosing your platform for Stories 2, since there currently isn't any crossplay support, and I don't think there will be. In terms of animations, as per usual, they are excellent. The Monster Hunter teams are always on another level when it comes to animation. Simple attacks look good, skills look great, and kinship attacks are not only great to look at, but also incredibly creative. Even if brutally exaggerated at times, which I guess can be a turnoff for some people. I mean, the double kinship attacks straight up look like they're a Dragon Ball Fighter Z Planet Buster explosion. Story cinematics also look fantastic and are very immersive, so beyond the problems around performance, visuals and animation are looking great. Onwards to sounds, soundtrack, and voice acting. Monster Hunter Stories 2 sound effects are great, and as a Gunlance user, I must say this is a very important part of my experience. If my explosions don't sound good, then why are we still here?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
Jokes aside, from familiar monster roars to impact sounds to menu navigation, explosions, everything sounds exactly like what you'd expect from a modern Monster Hunter game. In terms of soundtrack, I like it, but I wish there were ambient tracks for when you are exploring the world. There's music in villages, during certain story cutscenes and combat, but only ambient noises during exploration, which I guess shouldn't really be surprising, as music is also used to track when you're in combat in the mainline series. But for a JRPG, I would have really appreciated some ambient music in each of the areas, because I just spend a lot of time exploring and doing Everthens and doing all kinds of other activities out in the world. When it comes to voice acting, I was actually positively surprised, as I had heard several people complaining about Naviru's voice, but I thought it sounded fine. I don't really have any problem with the way Naviru sounds. I actually think he sounds pretty good. I've been playing the game with English audio, and I don't really have any complaints. Naturally, Japanese audio is always going to sound better. I'm not even going to try to debate that, but I think that the English audio that we have for Stories 2 is also pretty good, and I'm going to continue playing through it in English. Story. So, look, what if I said that a Palamute just decided to eat this part of the script? And luckily, the rest of the script was all digital, so it's fine, but this specific section, I just decided to write it on a piece of paper to get that rustic feel, you know? In all seriousness, 35 hours in, and today was the first time that I saw a story cinematic that really grabbed me, but the reasoning behind that is because I've spent most of my time playing around with monsties and crafting armor and weapons because I'm just in no rush to finish playing this game. What I have played of the story so far has been fairly standard: go to this village, do a couple of quests, hunt a couple of monsters, move on to the next village, and repeat. However, on the third village, things started getting a little more interesting. And I'm getting a vibe that this story is really going places, but it's going to take me a good long while to get to those places, and I'll eventually be making a follow-up video talking specifically about my thoughts on the story once I actually finish it. Until then, all I can say is so far so good, and the direction this is going is very promising, because this last cinematic I saw didn't pull any punches. Gameplay. The old bread and butter. Let's start things off by saying that unlike most JRPGs, Monster Hunter Stories 2 doesn't really shackle you with constant exposition and storytelling. Since most of your party members are monsters, it's not like you need to have constant conversations with them to ensure that their life's quests are still on track. There are storytelling moments and cinematics, but after the first couple of hours, most of your time is actually spent out in the world hunting for eggs, monster parts, bottle caps, random treasures, side quests, or trial quests. So let's break this down by activity. Side quests. These are fairly simple. You can find them in quest boards and villagers in any major village in the game. Their objectives can range from hunting a certain monster to delivering certain materials or equipping certain armor or weapons. The ones on the quest board can be repeated as often as you want for additional rewards. Usually, I pick up everything on the board and then go do whatever I feel like in the world, and if I complete them, fine. If not, I don't really care unless I see a specific reward that I want. I look at side quests as bonus rewards for things I'm probably going to do anyway while I'm out in the world. Trial quests. These are the equivalent of arena quests in a regular Monster Hunter game. Make sure you have an NPC buddy before you take these on, since during certain portions of the story you'll be alone, and taking on these quests during those times will be less efficient. But basically, as soon as you accept one of these, you get ported into an arena and combat starts. Please note that rewards are better if you win in less turns. Hunting for eggs is something you'll need to do in order to expand your roster of monsties. You'll do this by roaming the world and finding monster dens, which are dynamically placed in the map every time you zone in. At least I think it's every time you zone in. I haven't really tried resetting them on purpose. When you enter into one of these dens, there's a couple of different maps you might be presented with, but usually there will be monsters roaming inside, and you'll have to make your way towards the nest, where you'll then be able to pick up their eggs. Monster eggs are going to be random if you enter random dens in the world, and they vary in quality. The stinkier and heavier an egg is, the better stats your monstie will have. So if you just get a standard egg, make sure to keep trying until you get a better one or run out of eggs in that nest. Sometimes you might run into rare dens, which are represented by being golden instead of the standard gray ones. These will have a higher chance of getting you better eggs. However, there is a way to influence the monster eggs you are getting, and that is by engaging a specific monster in combat, pretty much any monster that you see on the map, and then using a paintball during that fight. Because you see, paintballs increase the chance of monsters retreating at the end of combat, and if they do that, then a new monster den will appear in the map, and usually those dens will only have eggs of the monster you were fighting. Min-maxing genes. Each monster you get will have certain genes associated with it. However, through the use of something called the Ritual of Channeling, you'll soon be able to change their genes, and essentially you'll get a huge amount of customization for each of the monsties in your team. You want the Lagombi that spits fireballs? You can do that. You want to boost your monstie's fire damage? You can do that too. Hell, I had a Velocidrome that could push rocks with its head and trample other monsters by simply using a Kuliaku gene, which I thought was pretty cool. There's a ridiculous amount of stuff that you can do. As to how viable it's all going to be in the endgame or multiplayer, I have no idea. But I think in the first couple of months, the min-maxing potential of Stories 2 is going to be insane. Okay, Rurikhan, everything sounds great so far, but how does the combat system work? So, Monster Hunter Stories 2 features a turn-based combat system, and you'll take control of the player character you created at the start of the game. While you can choose which monster to use, usually at the start of the fight, you don't really control it. It'll just do its own thing while you raise the kinship gauge by doing well in combat. After you get enough kinship, you can command the monster to perform certain skills, but that is going to use bits of the kinship gauge. The kinship gauge can also be used to perform special weapon skills by your player character. Or, if you fill it up all the way, you can then ride the Monstie and you unlock a special kinship skill with you and the Monstie, and it's simply devastating. Your character can use 3 weapons out of a selection of 6, and each of these weapons has a damage type associated with it. For slashing damage, there's the Great Sword and Sword and Shield. For blunt damage, there's Hammer and Hunting Horn. And for piercing damage, there's Bow and Gun Lance. Now, as you can imagine, different monsters will be vulnerable to different damage types. But that's not all, as in certain situations, you'll be able to target specific monster parts, and those will have their own set of vulnerabilities. Naturally, you'll want to select one weapon of each damage type, so you can swap during combat based on the monster or part you are attacking. The game does a good job of letting you know which attacks are efficient once you start hitting the monsters, so you don't have to memorize everything. Beyond that, there's also a rock, paper, scissors system in place for basic attacks and skills. Basically goes power beats technical, technical beats speed, speed beats power. Monsters will usually prefer certain attack styles, so you'll need to adjust the attacks you do and the monsters you use based on the monsters you are fighting. So for instance, if you're fighting a power-type monster like a Boldrome, the ideal pick would be a Velocidrome who is a speed type. However, monsters will change their attack patterns if they are enraged or in the special phase. As an example, Legiana is usually a speed type. If it enrages, it becomes a power type, and when it flies, it becomes a technical type. Also, not all skills have types associated with them. So for instance, a Gunlance Wyvern Fire doesn't really have any attack type, and neither does a Kezu's Roar. Then on top of all of this, there is also the traditional elemental advantages of Monster Hunter, like Kezus take additional damage from fire, for instance, which can be present in your weapons or in a Monstie's Fireball. There's quite a few more details about the combat, but this should give you a fairly good idea on what to expect. Now, in regards to multiplayer, this is actually one of the aspects of the game that I haven't really been able to test out. As you can imagine, during the review period and my limited availability, I didn't really have any opportunities to put it through its paces, but I'll be doing just that once the game releases, and I'll probably do a dedicated multiplayer video for those of you interested. In conclusion, between the gorgeous visuals and animations, the fun and engaging gameplay loop, and what I've experienced of the story thus far, Monster Hunter Stories 2 is an easy recommendation for anyone that is even remotely interested in this title. But luckily enough, you don't really have to take my word for it. There's a demo on Switch right now, you can check for yourself, and I would expect Steam to get a demo on release day as well, so you should be able to see for yourself whether this game is something that you are interested in or not. By the time you watch this video, I plan on streaming the demo over on Twitch, so if you want to ask me anything about it, come on over and have a chat. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit it up with a like. If you did not enjoy this video, hit it up with a dislike because feedback is important. If you usually enjoy my content, subscribe and hit the bell notification icon. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.